Hey everyone, welcome back to Behind the Emerald Veil podcast with Mandy and Allison from Soulstar Energy Collective. We're intuitive mentors and healers here to make intuition relatable, fun, and everything in between. We have a special guest with us today. So we have Asya Rose. She's an astrologer and a coach. And she also likes to make astrology relatable and to break things down so it's easy to understand. So we have invited Asya on to just kind of go through, I guess, the next 6 months of the year to see what we have in store. But Asya, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you. We've been following you for a little while now and have seen some of your other content and your other interviews. And we were both like, oh, we need to have her on.
I'm flattered. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Thank
I
you.
love that you do make it relatable or understand. So like, Mandy and I both are kind of like astrology novice, it's but I've been more and more called to understanding it a bit more. And I have found like with your content on Instagram, you'll say something and you'll be like, oh, look here in your chart. And then I'm instantly going to the apps and I'm like, okay, figure it out. And I'm like, it's so cool.
Yes,
Because,
I love that.
it's like the best thing because I learn by doing, not by
Yeah.
somebody telling me. So when you're saying, oh, go do this and this and this, and you've simplified it so my brain can understand it. I just love cross-referencing it and then deep diving on my own. So thank you for that
Oh.
so much.
Oh, I love hearing that. That makes me so happy. Thank you so much. I mean, that's the goal. I think um that's really why I started to, well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why I started to get into astrology, but I was getting frustrated when I was having my own astrological readings. As I was studying astrology just for my own self, my own knowledge, I would get frustrated in readings. And this is not to say anything negative about any astrologer that I've had a reading with or anyone I've worked with previously, but I would get frustrated because I would leave the session thinking, okay, that person clearly knows what they're talking about, but I have no idea what they're talking about.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I would
So
leave and
true.
I would feel more confused. I'd be like, okay, I think I get it. And then I would leave the session and be like, wait, no, I don't get it. And I set a goal for myself that anyone that I work with or any content that I try to put out there, even if it's almost like I'm oversimplifying things sometimes, but I do that on purpose because astrology is such a complex subject that once we get into like the really like deep parts of it, that's when you can tend to lose people. And it's great to do that, right? But if people don't even understand the basics, then you've already lost them from the beginning. So I always like when I work with people one on one and I do client sessions, even just the content that I'm trying to post on social media, I really try to make sure that, like, even just oversimplifying it, okay, this is what's happening in the sky. It's happening in this sign. Look up your chart. Look at where the sign is in your chart. See if it's like this is how it might manifest in your life now moving forward this week or this month or today or whatever that looks like. And it gives a more it gives a more general scope because the way that it's going to show up for every single person is going to be a little bit different depending on the specifics of your actual birth chart versus mine or versus somebody else's. But at least you're starting to like dip your feet in the water and get a taste of the understanding of this, again, incredibly complex subject.
It's so true. And it really truly is helpful because I agree with you. I've had different astrology readings and for sure I have left some where I'm like, oh yeah. And then I'm like, I don't know what that meant, or like during the conversation, I don't want to be rude. So I'm like, yeah, totally. And I'm like, I have no idea. So, but I'm like having like content like yours is just, yeah, it's kind of like, it really did. Like Maddie and I've said this on the podcast before. I said, astrology is a beast. I can't
Mm.
even get my head wrapped around. I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever get there. And it's just funny because I've been saying to Mandy lately too, where I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm being called to it more and more. And it's like, but this is how I learn is like, me doing like watching things like this, like not just somebody telling me, you know, how to do it, or, you know, I get lost. I think we took like a beginner astrology
Yeah.
course one time, and I followed along at the very beginning, and then the moment it just got too much, I was like, oh, and now I'm gone.
Well, those things are really helpful. Like if you're going to be doing it professionally and you're going to be looking at multiple charts and
Mm,
looking at, you know, transits and cycles and aspects and all of these things, like it is important to understand the complexities of
yeah,
everything, because that's when the specifics and the details change and vary by person to person. But
Mm.
yeah,
you're just trying to do like self discovery for yourself. And you're just saying, like, okay, there's a full moon this week. What does that mean for me? It doesn't need to get so crazy. You
yeah,
can kind of still have an overall theme and understanding of what the energy in the sky feels like. So it doesn't have to be so overwhelming. And I
Hmm.
think
yeah,
so much, and also like, let's be honest here, we're in content overload
Oh.
constantly, right? Just on social media, with TV, just everything on our phones, like everywhere. So we're absorbing so much content to begin with in general. And now on
mhm,
top of that, we have to now kind of figure it out at the same time. It just feels like extra work. So I said, I don't want anyone to be following me or my page and get like overwhelmed. I want them to finally be like, okay, finally something clicks. And that's why, like, a
yeah,
lot of times, especially in like one-on-one sessions with clients, and even on some of the stuff I post, I'll use a lot of metaphors to describe the
Mm.
astrology or the transits or the cycles. And like, for example, we just had a Jupiter Kazemi, and people are like, okay, well, what does a Kazemi mean? And I said, well, it means when a planet is next to the sun, so it gets like an increased boost of energy from the sun, like an increased momentum. And people are like, okay, like a reboot or a restart. And they're like, okay, I think I get it. I'm not really sure. And then I'm like, okay, think of when you have a Wi-Fi router, right? And you like unplug it and you restart it and you plug it back in. Suddenly it's like rebooted and it works really well again all of a sudden. That's how it feels when
yeah,
there's a Kazemi. So I tend to also use a lot of metaphors to describe a lot of the cycles and the planets and the transits, because I feel like when you give real life scenarios or real life examples in that way, something usually clicks for people, because you're like, oh, now I get it.
That makes
Like,
sense.
oh,
I understand what you mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. That's totally what my type of learning. Oh, right, that's good. I'm
Wait,
like, that's why it makes sense for me.
I mean, that's
I
also how I learned. So I just approach it the way that, like, honestly, the way I approach astrology is the way that I would want someone to teach me astrology. So that's
yeah.
me. So yeah.
I have a question though, just talking about like, so when you're posting your content and you're saying, hey, like this is happening in the sky, you can check your own chart. Are you checking when we're checking our chart? I'm always confused. Do I check my birth chart or am I checking my current chart? Is there a current chart?
You're okay. So you're checking your birth chart.
Thank you.
So there's multiple charts. Okay,
Yeah.
this is where I might lose people. Okay. There is your birth chart, right? That shows where the planets were in the sky at the time of your birth when you took that first breath, right?
Yes.
And it all starts with your rising sign or your ascendant. That's the very beginning part of your chart. But that is your birth chart. That will never change. That will always stay the same. Unless you're one of those people who got their birth time mixed up, and that also happens where like people's charts change.
Yeah.
This is why having the exact birth time is like really important, because even 15 minutes can shift a lot of things in their birth chart. um that being said, I digress, but that being said, you have a birth chart, right? And then you have a transit chart that goes
Oh.
around your birth chart, and that transit chart is showing you what's in the sky now, right? What are the planets in the sky
Oh,
now? What are the planets a month ago, a week ago, a year ago, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now? So that is a transit chart and we can take a look at the transit chart and see how it communicates with your natal birth chart. And then we're
mm,
able to see patterns and themes and kind of get an idea of then. But you want to be looking at your in the beginning,
Yeah.
and right, I don't want to overwhelm everybody, because there's like even a third chart, there's a progress chart, there's lots of things that we can get into complex complexities here. We don't need to do that, but I want you to check your birth chart. And the reason why is,
mm,
when you're listening to my content, I'm
Yeah.
not speaking for anybody, because I will say, look at where Taurus is in your chart. This is where this full moon is going to happen. Or look at where Gemini is in your chart. This is where Jupiter is going to move into this week.
I
When I
see.
see those things, you want to look at your actual birth chart and see, okay, where's Gemini in my birth chart? Oh, actually, it's my rising sign, it's my ascendant, which means it's my first house, which means this cycle is going to be moving into my first house and it's going to be activating this part of my life. So when you
uh,
get into like more complexities and more details, you can start looking at all the other stuff. But if you're following me and my content and I say, check this part of your chart, I want you looking at your actual birth chart.
Ah, thank you.
Yeah.
So it's tangible, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and even just like understanding, because I remember at first I was like, what does the first house mean? What does the second house mean? And I'm like, obviously it's important because I see people talking about it. So it's like, it's one of these things though, like when you can kind of like do it for yourself and really kind of like, I don't know, it's like I go into a rabbit hole and I'm kind of like, okay, I want to figure this out, that she just said this, I want to figure it out for myself. And I don't know, it starts to just land. Like I'm starting to have things kind of like come into my head. And, I put in my mom and my son and my, people's charts. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'll get like little things where I'm like, oh, you've got two fire signs and a earth. Ooh, makes sense. And like, I'm like, didn't know this 6 months ago.
Yeah. But see, it's starting to click little by little. People think that like if they study something, it has to work immediately right away. Otherwise it won't work or we won't get it. Right? It's like learning to ride a bike. I say this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You don't learn after getting on a bike the first time. I mean, maybe some people do. I don't learn that way, right? You have to keep practicing. You have to keep learning. You have to keep doing it over and over and over again. And eventually something just clicks.
And that's how we feel. Yeah, that's how we feel about developing your intuition and understanding your intuition. We say this all the time. It's not like you are just going to know the things and then be able to do the things. There is a practice to it and it's going to take time. And as you take that time, you'll get better at it and it will get stronger for you and you'll have more confidence in it. So there is a process, just like anything, practicing yoga, practicing riding a bike, any type of sport, any skill that you're trying to develop, it will take time for you to gain that confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And people forget that because by the way, I'm just as guilty of this, right? We're such goal achievers. We're like, this is the goal. I want to get to it right away.
Yes.
And we forget that it takes time and it's a process. And like, especially if we're learning something new, right?
Yeah. So. Cool. Tell us a little bit about your journey to astrology. Like, how did you get interested? How did you get to the point of wanting to study? And then what put you on the path of, sharing your skill in a professional space?
Okay. How much time do we have? Okay. I'll give you the Cliff's Notes version so we don't take up too much time. But essentially, I had my first my first astrology reading with somebody 9 years ago. And I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart, so I'm naturally a skeptic and I like to see beneath the surface. I don't like surface level anything. I'm like, what is really going on here? I like to get to the depths of whatever I need to get to. So I had a session with someone and I went in there like almost like with my arms crossed and I was like, okay, we'll see how legit this is, right? And, like I was the worst client, right? Like I was like, okay, we'll see what you know. And I was surprised at how much this person knew about me by not knowing anything about me, right? And I was like, ooh, okay. And then I went down that rabbit hole, right, that we all do. And I was like, wait, maybe she found this because she saw my social media. And I was like, this is crazy I get, right? I'm like, and I'm going down, I'm like, did she know this? Because like maybe I posted about it 6 months ago. Not really, like who the hell has time to go through their client's social media to like, you don't need to do that,
So
right?
true.
But I was like, I'm gonna prove this wrong. I'm gonna prove this wrong, right? And then I was like, okay. And then I started to learn it on my own. One, to have a sense of self-discovery because it was the first time I really felt like I was really seen in a way because I couldn't understand why certain parts of my chart, I just didn't have an explanation for why I felt different than other people or why I seemed different or like why I'm just such an intense person. Hello, all my Scorpio, right? Like I couldn't, I felt it, but I couldn't put words to it or explanation to it. And I think when I started to discover astrology in the beginning, I was really studying it to prove it wrong. My skepticism. I was like, I'm going to study this to prove
so rebellious.
Bullshit. Right? I'm going to study this to prove. And the more that I learned, the more that I was proven wrong, the more I saw the legitimacy of it. Not only the legitimacy of it, but the importance of it. It was like I at some point I started to read like some of the astrology books I was reading were fascinating to me because like there were some astrology books that I read that there was like people who would take like historic events in time and they would see like planetary, like historians that became astrologers later in life that would
Mm.
use their history background, and they would see patterns and themes in the sky with like world wars and all these other things, and see like
Oh.
if they repeated astrologically, like if there was an astrological cycle
Ah,
that was like repeating, and this is why this was happening. So there was so much studying that I was doing. I was like, oh my God, not only is there legitimacy to this, there's importance to this. And then at first it was really just doing it for myself for fun, just like, okay, because that's how we all start to get interested in anything. We want to like discover more about ourselves for most people, right? And then I started to really unpack it with like my friends and my family and trying to like see, oh, I actually helped me have a lot more patience with
yeah,
certain people in my life.
yeah, I bet.
Because not
Yeah.
that I would like make excuses and enable their behavior, but I'd be like, why do they react this way? And then I would see certain things in their chart and I would say, oh, you know what? Like that's just in their nature. Not that I'm excusing this behavior, but I have more empathy and understanding of why it's happening so that like I don't lose my patience with that person and I create a safe space for them to now step in and grow and change, right? So because their chart is different than mine, right? As it should be.
Mm.
And it helped me understand people more. And then I started really doing like readings for my friends all the time, and stuff would happen in their life and I'd be like, hold on, I want to look up your chart, I want to see what's happening, right? Not And I would give them advice and start doing readings for them, and I kept getting the same message over and over and over again from different people in my life, which was, wow, the what you saw in my chart, like no one's ever told me that before. In the other
Mhm.
readings I've had, no one ever mentioned this, or I didn't quite get it, but when you told me this, it finally clicked. The way you explained it, I finally get it. So there was something about the way I was doing it that was resonating with people. And I was like, okay, I can't. And at first I was ignoring it because that's what we do, right? With people close to us sometimes. I was like, oh, these are just my friends like making me feel good about it. And then I started to no, it became so obvious I couldn't ignore it anymore. I just kept hearing it everywhere. Everyone's like, wow, I never really, nothing ever clicked. And the way you just explained it, if I finally get it. And people were starting to say to me, you really need to start doing this professionally. Like it
Mm,
wasn't until other people were telling me this thing is intuitively, you just talked about intuition and how important it is to harness it and practice it. Intuitively, I was getting these messages.
hmm.
Time I was just ignoring them. It's
Yes.
almost like I was waiting for outside validation to take the leap of faith, but it was already inside of me the whole time.
Yeah.
Didn't trust it for a long time.
Right.
Absolutely. What were you
Would,
doing in your career at that? Like, what were
I
you
was
doing for
working
work?
in the entertainment industry and
Oh,
in health
okay.
and fitness and stuff specifically. Yeah, so
Oh,
I was in Los Angeles here in Hollywood and stuff. So I was
yeah.
and it's funny because like I'd be on set with somebody and I'd be like, "Oh, what's your sun sign?" Like I would talk about astrology. So what's your rising sign? I was like, "Yeah, that makes sense." You know, like I would talk about it in like other work environments, and I also feel like it came at nauseum to my friends who were like, "All right, you just need to do this as a career now because you just always talk about it."
Don't you find though astrology is way more accepted? Like, I'm just thinking like you're doing that at work, and I'm like, ooh, like, Mandy and I work full time. And talking about your intuition or psychic abilities and stuff like that, like it's kind of like a hush hush, like it has been not as easy, but I'm like, oh man, astrology people, it's like Reiki. When you say, oh, I do energy healings, Reiki, and they're like, yeah, then it's accepted. Where
Mhm.
also astrology, because everybody knows, or most people know, of like, what's your sun sign? Oh yeah, I'm a Gemini or whatever, and it's this accepted practice more so. And I'm like, yeah, I love that
Mhm.
you know just people accepting it and kind of going with it. That's super
Yeah.
neat.
It's
It
a
makes
nice little, and it's a nice little gateway to open up that conversation, those deeper conversations, and people actually becoming interested in self-discovery. And I mean,
Yes.
astrology is actually something that I started with before I started developing my intuition. It's astrology. I took a beginner astrology course and I learned about the houses and the signs and the fixed and the like the elements and stuff like that. That was like, I don't know, 5 years ago now. But that's where I started because I was like, I really want to know myself at a deeper level. I wanted to know my children at a deeper level and my husband at a deeper level. But then I realized how much studying you have to do. And then it was the energy stuff, the energy work that really pulled me forward a lot stronger than the astrology. But the astrology was a nice little like bridgeway into the energy.
It was like a gateway.
It was, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do still find it fascinating. I know that for Ali and I both, it'll be something that we study at some point in the future because it is so beneficial, I think, to understand yourself at that level, not only understanding um, your energy, but also like your stars, like all the stuff. Like it's just very holistic. All of it comes together.
Well, it's
Yeah.
interesting you say that because I have like a few different sessions that I offer on my website, and one of the most popular ones that's become like really popular lately is like I do a combo session where I compare two different people's charts. We
Mm.
do like a synastry, we do a composite chart, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of different things, a lot of complexity there, but it's all about like comparison of two different people and how what their strengths are in partnership and relationship, what their weaknesses are, what their karmic lessons are, what one person is there to teach the other versus the other, like, and vice versa. And originally when I started that offering, I assumed the majority of that would be in like love relationships and partnerships, but I'm noticing more and more clients, at least the people that follow me, the majority of the people that are booking these sessions are mothers who are wanting to discover things about their children.
Yeah.
Also, business partners to see like if they're compatible to
I was
do
just
business.
gonna say we should do it, Allison.
It
Yeah,
just
to
came
see like
into my head. Yeah, I
where
was like,
their strengths
yeah.
are, their weaknesses are, but
Yeah.
also to see like what they're here to learn from each other. And you can see these
Mm.
things. And I notice again a lot of mothers who are like, what is part of like the karmic reason? Because you can see things of like why this soul reincarnated, what
Mm-hmm.
they're supposed to be releasing from past karma, and what they're supposed to be learning and stepping into the good karma of their lifetime and their incarnation now. And a lot of mothers will say like, how can I best support my child moving
Yeah.
forward?
I
Which
love
I
that.
think is, it's not just that astrology is becoming more mainstream, it's that we're also using it as a tool to really help facilitate things like energy healing, like therapy, like breath work, like just showing up and being better parents, better business partners, better relationship partners, like all any extra tool that we can do to help and not only understand people, but to see, right, like now it wasn't until I understood certain parts of my chart where I realized like certain signs drive me crazy. And then I realized studying my chart, I said, oh, it drives me crazy because I have the most to learn from them.
Yeah.
Ah.
That makes
It
so much
changes
sense.
perspective,
Yes.
right? Maybe before you might have been more impatient with certain things. Now you understand its purpose.
And
Yeah.
I imagine understanding its purpose or even understanding your chart in that type of depth, that it also gives you permission to show up authentically.
Yeah.
Whereas before, perhaps you felt nervous or scared to maybe move forward on a certain project or show up in a certain way or be a certain type of person. But in your chart, I imagine you would get some clarity and you'd be like, oh, that's why I feel called to do this. But society tells me I shouldn't. But that's why I feel so called to do it. I'm going to do it anyways. So cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
100%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love like it really is about like learning yourself more and understanding yourself more. And I know the more I deep dive into it, it has helped understand why certain parts of me show up a certain way or whatever it is. But like I also love when you talk about how it helps you with your relationships around you, right? And so that has definitely like for sure been something that has been even like through this separate my marriage breaking down and all of that, you know, there's healing in all of this. And I have actually found like I'm dying to know my ex's time of birth, but it's kind of a weird thing to ask at this point, but I have a general idea. And you know, when I start to now like look into it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's like I can understand him on a different level, which helps with the healing and understand why, oh, okay, so him as a Libra, when it comes to this and like this is what they need, and you know, the shutting down or whatever it is, it really does allow you to see them in a different light and to be able to then have more compassion or understanding for where they're at. And you know, I've now been like deep diving, you know, any challenging relationships in my life, family I've been looking at, and it truly is like it truly has given me different perspectives. And like again, your kids, hands down, like just the little bit of information that I've been getting. And actually I was reading it to them on the weekend because I was like, I've really been going, yeah. And so we've been sitting there and I'm like reading out all these different things for them. And they're kind of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And, all of these things. And when my kids, my youngest starts to cry because, you know, in my head, I'm like, okay, you're being a little sensitive. Well, it totally like now I'm like, oh, that's this part of his chart. Okay, honey, you let that out. You need to do what you need to do. Like it's so I
And the
just
kids,
feel like there's so much to it,
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, because
No.
then the kids also grow up to be more authentic themselves, right? Because
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're not growing up with shame around
Yes.
certain parts of their chart or placements of like, why am I more emotional than someone else? Like we're able to see again their strengths, their challenges, their weaknesses, all of these things we're able to see in their chart. There's more authenticity that they grow up with, and there's less shame around the things that make them different because they're supposed to be different. We're not
Yeah.
supposed to all be alike, right?
No.
And I love, by the way, that you mentioned healing, because I had a session with a client, and I don't like to, for privacy purposes, I don't like to give too much information, but I had a session with a client recently who was really just like having a really hard time letting an ex go.
Mhm.
And I've been working with her consistently. We'll do like quarterly check-ins and stuff where she's like, just tell me what I need to know for the next several months so like I can understand the astrology, what's getting activated in my chart, and then I'll see you 2 months from now and 2 months from now, whatever it is. And
Love
so
it.
lately she's just been she couldn't understand why she just kept trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, metaphorically, right? And
Yeah.
she's like, I don't understand why I just keep trying to work at this. And it wasn't until I combined the two charts together, and I won't ever tell anybody to necessarily like leave. This is where free will comes into play. But I will
Absolutely.
say this is what's happening, right?
Mhm.
And it was very obvious to me when I pulled up both of their charts and put them together, and I said, you guys were both karmic lessons for each other, but it was never supposed to last.
Wow.
And there was something about me saying that to her that she like sent me a voice message the next day, like literally sobbing, saying I was finally able to release this person. Like I've
Wow.
had so much healing because I felt like I was doing something wrong, because like I kept trying to make this work and I couldn't figure out why it didn't work. And I said, because it was never supposed to work. This person came
Mm.
into your life to teach you lessons karmically. I can very obviously see that in your chart, but it wasn't supposed to work.
And it gives you
And
permission to, yeah, let go. Like that's huge. Sometimes we just need that permission to be able to take that next step.
Yeah.
but she also was ready to receive that message at that time. Not everybody wants
Yeah.
to hear that,
Hmm.
so I have been working with her since last year consistently, and we never once like talked about this part of her chart and his chart before. But she was almost like, she's like, I actually want to book the session now because I want to see what's holding me back from moving forward. And
Mm.
so I also believe that we trust our intuition, right? Like when we're ready to get those messages. If I would have said that to her a year ago, she probably wouldn't have been able to receive it,
Yeah.
right? So I think something about the timing of it, where she was like, I'm ready and I want to do this now, and allowed me to pull up both of their charts and say, like, it's not you, you're not the problem.
Yeah.
Like this
Yeah.
was just about lessons.
Love
Yeah.
that. I love that.
Oh, me too. Oh, it's so interesting. I get so jacked up about it now.
Let's
Yeah.
move into a little bit about what we can expect for the next half of this year.
Ooh.
Do you see any like spill the tea?
All right. Well, listen, this is where free will also comes into play, right?
Yes.
Like I can tell you energetically what's happening in the sky. The way anybody who's going to say this is exactly how it's going to manifest is essentially lying to you, because things change all the time dependent on like people's free will, right? One thing I will say this week in the beginning, we'll start with just this week alone, okay?
Okay.
Jupiter is switching signs for the first time in a year, and it
Okay.
is moving into the sign of Gemini. And I don't know if anyone has any Gemini placements, but
Allison.
okay, you have Jupiter moving in there. And Jupiter in astrology is the planet of hope, expansion, abundance, opportunity, ease, flow, right? Where Saturn comes in and Saturn restricts, Jupiter comes in and Jupiter expands. So there's
Ooh.
a lot of like hopefulness and opportunity with Jupiter. So it's been sitting in the sign of Taurus for the past year. This Saturday, May 25th, although actually I don't know when you guys are airing this, so I'll just say May 25th. Uh, Jupiter is and will be moving into the sign of Gemini, and it's going to stay there until June 9th, 2025. So a little bit over a year. And it's essentially starting to expand and bring opportunity in a new area of your life. So for everybody, right, you would want to look up your birth chart.
Yeah.
And see where Gemini is in your chart, because that's where Jupiter is going to move in and expand this energy, right? And if you have personal planets or personal placements there, that's also going to make a big difference, right? Not everyone has Gemini placements, depending on like which planet or placement that's in, and depending on which house, right? This is where it gets a little complex. But essentially, Jupiter is going to bring opportunity and expansion in a new area of your life over the next year. So with Jupiter, we want to plant seeds. That's the most important thing to understand about Jupiter, right? The metaphor that I use a lot in my sessions is we can, let's say we've killed plants in our home. I'm speaking for myself because I don't like this plant back here. This is fake, right? I'm not good at keeping plants alive.
Me neither.
I just never seem to find the right watering schedule, right? And suddenly Jupiter comes in, and now it brings the right soil and it brings the right water, and now your plants are thriving. You're like, wow, that's so much easier than I thought that was going to be. That's how Jupiter feels metaphorically, right? I said I use metaphors. Here you go. Metaphorically, that's how Jupiter can feel. But what's important for people to remember is you still have to plant the seeds, right?
Yes.
If you don't plant the seeds, Jupiter won't have anything to expand and grow. So this is how you utilize Jupiter's energy. So you want to look at where Gemini is in your chart, because that's where Jupiter is going to be expanding over the next year. And simultaneously, like, again, that will be bringing a lot more opportunity, hope, ease, flow into this area of your life, depending on where Gemini is. So that's the first thing. Oh, so the other thing I wanted to say is the last time Jupiter was in Gemini was June 2012 to June 2013.
Okay.
So that might give you some idea of like what was happening in your life at that time period, like where, like when you look up your chart, what were the changes, what were the opportunities, what were the doors that opened, what was being expanded and growing in my life at that time period. It might give you some insight onto like what this next year can look like in that part of your chart.
I love that.
I'm like waiting to like deep dive. I'm like got my chart up and I'm like,
I love it. I get so excited when I talk about astrology and people want to look up their chart. To me, that's gold.
I've got my phone too.
You got your phone. I know. I'm like sitting there going, okay, Gemini. I'm like, because I'm a Gemini.
My sun sign's a Gemini.
My sun sign's a Gemini.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm like sitting here going like, okay, Gemini, eighth house, Sun, Mercury, planet. And so I'm like,
rising? Are you
I'm a Libra rising.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have Scorpio, Jupiter's in Scorpio in my first house. So it was so interesting when you started talking about Scorpio and some of like your skepticism or, the things at the beginning. And I was sitting there going like, oh my God, I have such a strong, so as much as I believe in all of this, always have, I still have always had that like, let me see if I can disprove it. So I found that so interesting when you said that, because I was like, wait a minute, that sounds a lot like me.
But I needed that. That's how I needed to experience it in order to like believe in it.
Yes. Yeah. So cool. Okay.
And then we have a Mercury retrograde this summer, which is not anything to be afraid of, because we have Mercury retrogrades sometimes 3 or 4 times a year. The only thing I will say during Mercury retrogrades, it's going to be in Virgo, and then it's going to retrograde into the sign of Leo, and then it's going to move direct. So it's going to go through 2 different signs. That's going to happen from August 4th to August 28th. Okay. And the reason why I think this one's important to mention is because a lot of people are traveling during the summer, right?
Oh, yes.
A lot of people go on trips. So the thing that I want to tell everybody, it doesn't mean you can't go travel or go on trips, but Mercury retrogrades are notorious for causing delays, miscommunications, misunderstandings, like just things going wrong with technology and this timing. It's just, that's like a very mercurial thing. Okay. So if you are planning to travel this summer, just plan extra time for wherever you're going. That's all I'm going to say, right? Plan for delays because it's more likely to happen, and double check your flights, double check your hotel reservations, double check things. I tell people you don't have to not do these things during a retrograde. It's just retrogrades are for reviewing, reflecting, reassessing, all of these things. Actually, we have a lot of retrogrades this summer. So the overall energy, okay, here's big picture, right? We've had a lot of changes this first half of the year so far.
Yeah.
Like a lot for a lot of different people in different areas of their life. And now we're moving into retrograde season this summer. There's a lot of planets that are going to be in retrograde at the same time. Essentially, what that means, retrogrades overall, means, and there's a common misconception that people think like the planet moves backwards when there's a retrograde. That's not true. It means everything else is moving forward and that planet is kind of staying still. It's in a pause.
Oh.
Like you running. Okay, here's a metaphor for you, right? You're running with your friend, and suddenly your friend passes you and is going faster than you. You haven't stopped running, you're still running. It just seems like you're going backwards because your friend is much faster than you. That's how retrogrades kind of are. The planet doesn't necessarily move backwards. It's just kind of staying in a pause motion while everything else moves direct.
Okay.
So we have a lot of the reason for the pause is to pause. Literally, right? Retrogrades are times to review things, to reflect on things, lots and lots of reflection, to reassess things, to pivot if we need to, so that when these planets move direct, we now know if we need to pivot and which door or which way we're going now instead, right? A lot of the summer energy overall is going to feel like, holy shit, pardon my language, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse here.
Oh, totally.
Right? So much has happened this year so far. Now it's time to like integrate everything, reflect on everything, and see, does something need to change? Does something need to pivot? Now that like I've had time to catch my breath through all of these shifts and changes in my life in the first half of the year, do I want to do something differently? Right? This is what retrogrades are used for. They're not here to harm you. They're here to help you. So it's really, if we're always going, and we're never taking the time to like integrate things and pause and reassess things, then we're going to be like impulsively making decisions left and right that maybe aren't always suited or best for us. So this is how you utilize retrograde energy in general to your advantage. It's time to review. Like what needs to be reviewed, what needs to be reflected on, what needs to be integrated. And if you need to pivot, that's a good time to pivot.
Oh, I like that.
So
I like it.
that's kind of like the energy in the summer.
Okay.
Generally. So it's going to be, it should theoretically be a little bit more of a slowdown or a pause. The thing that happens during retrogrades notoriously is people get impatient because they like to sit and pause. And they're like, okay, stuff was moving this year and now like it's come to a standstill because it's supposed to. So it's not time to rush the process. It's time to sit in the process.
Love that.
Yeah.
Okay. I love it. I love it because it can kind of give you like, I don't know. I just find like having these like little insights is like, okay, it's like it gives you this permission to do it. And then it kind of like gives you this like lead up to be like, okay, Allison, just know that if you start to feel antsy, it's okay. Like just pause.
Yeah,
right?
It's normal. It's to be expected. And in fact, what I noticed a lot in retrogrades is when people like use the energy to their advantage and they like sit on things, usually a few weeks goes by and they're like, thank God I didn't make that decision and I had more time to think about it.
So true.
It's very much like a hindsight thing of like, oh, this is why that wasn't supposed to happen yet. Or this is why I wasn't supposed to impulsively say yes to this because like that's what would have happened. So again, they're not here to hurt us or harm us. They're really for reflection and pause and integration.
I love that perspective shift on that because I think we all kind of like go into that like, oh, it's like retrograde, you know, and we can like put on this energy of all of us. And so I love that switch in perspective to be like, yeah, it's retrograde. Now it's time to just pause and reflect. And I love reflecting. So Mandy's like, she reflects too much.
I'm just as guilty of this too, right? Like I know the retrogrades are happening and I still get impatient about things. I'm like, oh, so we're all human. Like we're allowed to have feelings and emotions and triggers and reactions to things, but just know that it doesn't necessarily mean like you have to do more. Sometimes you have to do less and just like let things flow the way that they need to and will work out, right? Then on September 1st, Pluto is moving back into Capricorn, and this is an interesting transit. So Pluto in astrology is the planet that is all about death, rebirth, transformation, metamorphosis, change, power dynamics. it's really like, it's ruled Scorpio, right? Scorpio is ruled by Pluto. So it's a very intense planet. We feel its shifts in a significant way. And a lot of times the way that it does it is also by revealing things, right? Pluto rules the underworld. It's the god of the underworld. So it likes to uncover things that are hidden, right?
Mm.
Whether we've had a blind spot to this area of our life, or whether it's something's been hidden from us, or whether we're like, okay, I've been ignoring it. Pluto comes in and it's like, guess what? Time to deal with this now, right? That's how Pluto feels sometimes. Like, and it's almost always not an ideal timing that we think it is, but it's actually happening because it's supposed to, right? So Pluto is moving back into Capricorn. And previously, Pluto was in the sign of Capricorn for 15 years before. So Pluto cycles are very, very long. So essentially, what this means is wherever it sits at any given point in time, it's causing a long, slow, transformative metamorphosis process in that area of your life. So wherever it's been sitting in Capricorn for the previous 15 years, it's been transforming that area of your life. Again, whether you realize this or not, it may have not felt so intense the whole time, but it's been doing a continuous change and transformation. This year, in January, it moved into the sign of Aquarius. So it switched signs for the first time in 15 years. And this is why a lot of people had a lot of changes happening in their life this past January, right? Because Pluto came in and it said, guess what? I'm going to start bringing change and metamorphosis and truth into a new area of your life, whether you're ready for it or not. So Pluto has been sitting in the sign of Aquarius since January, and it's just started retrograding recently, and it's going to move back into Capricorn in September.
So would we be looking at where Capricorn is in our birth chart?
You want to look at where Capricorn is in your birth chart,
Okay.
and you're going to know what this is because you've been dealing with it for 15 years before, right? It shouldn't surprise you, is what I'm saying. Okay. But essentially what Pluto is doing is it's coming back in to do like the final edit of the book before it moves back into Aquarius and stays there for 20 years. So yeah, 20 years is going to be in Aquarius.
When does it move into Aquarius?
It's going to move back into Capricorn September 1st.
Yeah.
Then it's going to move direct and move back into Aquarius on November 19th. So 2.5 months.
Oh.
And then stay there for 20 years. What I think is interesting about this is that that's during election season in the US.
Oh, yes, it is. And it's a big one. Oh, really?
Nervous laughter.
I know. I'm like,
she has a nervous laughter because she knows what it means.
Well, so
it's gonna, you know what it feels. Here's the thing that I've been saying about Capricorn and Aquarius, the differences, right? Capricorn is very much a sign that's all about rules, structures, limitations, like practicality. Like this is the step-by-step guide. This is how you do things. This is the right way to do things, right? Rules and structures and limitations. And Aquarius is all about being rebellious and innovative and breaking rules and breaking structures. So Pluto, the sign of like change and transformation, has been sitting in a sign that's been all about limitations and rules, and now it's moving into a sign that's all about breaking rules. So what, to me, metaphorically, big picture, right? It's the beginning of this year so far has felt like, wow, we're innovating. We're moving forward. We're breaking the rules here. We're breaking the rules here. We're doing things differently than we've ever done it before because we're supposed to. And I think energetically, the theme in September to November may feel like, okay, are we taking a step back now? Like, why does it feel like we're back where we were before? So some people may not like this because Pluto's again coming back in to be like, I'm not quite done here yet. I still need to like cross all my T's, cross all my T's, dot all my I's, and just wrap things up before I move forward again. It's almost like that last final test before it moves on.
Okay.
I just think it's interesting that it'll happen during elections, so I have no idea what's going to happen, but I feel like it's going to move into right after election season, November 19th, it's going to move back into Aquarius. So I feel like energetically, the energy is going to be like, we thought we were making change. Oh shit, now we're realizing we're not making change. And then it's going to move back into Aquarius. It's like, okay, now we're making change again. Like, how do we rebel against this? Because that's not what we really wanted. So it's going to it may feel like this whole year we've been taking all these steps forward. And then in the fall, it may feel like we take some back and then we're going to start taking steps forward again. So I wouldn't be surprised if that type of energy like kind of initiates more rebellious nature from people, or more revolutionary nature in people. I mean, historically, when Pluto was in Aquarius, previous centuries and generations before, we had the American Revolution and we had the French Revolution. So there was an uprising of the people.
Yeah.
I'm reading between the lines, Asha. Reading
Yeah,
between
I
the
don't want
lines.
to say anything. I'm just
no.
that it'll be interesting to see what transpires. I feel like a lot of this year so far has been like a lot of hope around like change.
Yeah.
Then suddenly it may feel like, oh shit, we've hit a standstill. And then people are going to be like, no, we can't go back now.
Yeah.
What do we do to move forward again?
Yeah. And when Mandy, when we had felt into the year ahead, we saw these uprisings, these people coming together, you know, moving towards that like wanting to make change and being like, actually, no.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is so kind of exciting because I'm like,
well,
like,
the astrology is saying that, right? It's saying
wow.
actually. And then what happens is when people say actually no, it makes you angrier, it makes you want to do it more. Right. So it's not accidental that we're look at what's happening at college campuses, right? Like all of these uprisings of people they're realizing that we have a voice, that there's strength in numbers.
Yes.
Right. Capricorn is also all about like governments and institutions and corporations, right? This is Pluto's also about power and power dynamics. So like governments and all of these institutions and big conglomerates, right? Corporations have been like growing in power. And now Aquarius is all about humanity and humanitarian things and the people. So suddenly this whole cycle is going to be about people uprising again and realizing like we actually have the power, we actually have the voice, and there is strength in numbers.
Yes.
One person doesn't have to decide everything, that the people can decide everything. So when we talk about energetically what this feels like, it's going to feel like we're taking steps forward, and then suddenly I guess we're not, which is going to light a fire under people to like motivate them to push even harder.
I love that. And then for the next 20 years, we should see significant change then in all of the systems and the structures and the
yes, but it won't come without difficulty.
Yeah.
Right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think that there will, right? People who are in power like to stay in power. So I feel like people won't, like give up willingly, right? Like people will stand in their convictions and power. So there may be, I feel like, I really hate to say this. I feel like it's going to get worse before it gets better.
No, and we agree. We definitely agree with that and feel that too.
But I feel like because it has to.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
when we had the American Revolution and the French Revolution, the reason why there was uprisings in people was because of what was happening. Right. So it's like things got so bad the people had no choice but to align together.
To make a change. And we don't make change if we're comfortable. We literally do not make change if we're comfortable. So that's where it completely like makes sense, where things have to crumble, and for things to crumble, it's like it gets super uncomfortable before then it gets for us to rebuild it. So that completely makes sense. As uncomfortable as it is, like even though we can all sit here and be like there's part of me that's like, yes, I'm excited about this, but then also my human is like, oh God, what does that mean?
We're excited about it until we see it show up in real life, and we see what actually happens when we have to make changes, right? When we see the destruction that happens, because Pluto can be very destructive, right? Like when we see, but because it is the planet of death and rebirth, but and people love the rebirth part. When I talk about it, Pluto is literally Phoenix rising from the ashes. Everyone loves to hear about that. Everyone wants to be a Phoenix, but they forget that something has to burn down first in order for the Phoenix to rise.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't mean like literally. I mean like, metaphorically.
Yes.
Energetically, like something has to crumble in order for something new to rise up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the energy that we're in now, of like things are going to start to crumble, and it won't happen easily. But eventually there will be a light at the end of the tunnel. We just have to remember when we're in it, when we're in the darkness of the tunnel, we have to remember our purpose and why we're here. And we have to remember that there is a light, because when you start walking that path, and again, you're in the tunnel, you're like, shit, what am I doing? I can't see
Mhm.
anymore. It's too dark here. And
Mm.
we get tempted to like turn back to our comfort zone, right? And the goal is to keep powering through and keep the whole lesson with Pluto is always to stay in your power. It's
Mhm.
always about power. It's either someone is trying to take your power away or something is coming in to try to empower you to step into your own power. So this is why you're seeing uprisings of people, because people are trying to get their power back.
Mhm.
Yeah, to bring their power back. Now, I'm just wondering if how can somebody I know I'm in my head, I'm like, um, how can somebody finding Pluto in their own chart and like, I don't know, like in my head, I'm like,
What you would do is you would look at where Capricorn is in your chart, because that's where Pluto's going to
mm,
go back, and that's
mhm,
where it's initiating change. But more importantly, you're also going to see where Aquarius is in your chart, because
mm,
that's where Pluto moved into beginning of this year and
yeah,
started implementing all these changes, and will continue to implement these changes for the next 20 years. Wherever Aquarius
mm,
is in your chart, Pluto is coming in to change something. It's causing a death and rebirth of some kind, and it's forcing you to step in your power in that way. So,
yeah,
like Pluto's going into your seventh house of partnerships and relationships, it's forcing you to step into your power in regards to a relationship dynamic, right?
yeah,
Or if it's showing up in you know, your area of your chart that's all around your children, it's forcing you to step into your power. And this, look, wherever it is, it's bringing in change. The worst thing that someone can do, oh, I don't want to say worse, but like the way that you make this cycle harder for yourself is if you fight it. The wave is coming and you're trying to like hold it from, stop it from happening.
yeah,
You know, it's gonna happen. It's bringing change whether we like it or not. There is, and there this cycle is really challenging for people who don't like change, myself included, by the way. Right, like when we like change but we want to control the change, right, for a lot of people. And that's very much Aquarius energy. Aquarius is a fixed sign. It's very fixed and stubborn in its nature, in the sense that like it's not afraid of change, but it wants to like have control over the change, right? So this is an area of your life that maybe you've been fixed. Wherever Aquarius is in your chart, maybe you've had fixed energy there. And now a planet that is all about bringing change, metamorphosis, empowerment, and all of these things is going to come in and force
yeah,
you to change here. And for a lot of people, this has been very shocking since January, because they're like, I didn't realize like this was going to start happening in my life, and I was going to be forced to change in this area of my life, or like things are showing up in my life. I don't know why. I'm like, yeah, because it's trying to, again, force you to change or be. That's what Pluto is. Pluto is a catalyst at the end of the day. It
that's
really wants
crazy.
like the whole metamorphosis process, because if we're not changing and growing, then what are we doing here?
I have a,
Totally,
I have a,
absolutely.
can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I was just looking at my son's chart quickly as you were talking, because I know he has a lot of Aquarius in his chart, and I was like, ooh, but he's in Aquarius rising. So that's the
Oh,
first
interesting.
house, right?
First house, yeah.
So that's all about like your personality and who you are.
Personality, who you are. It's a lot of times it's also like your body, your image, your look, your it's essentially the house of your like your self identity.
So
It's
he's,
the house of like other people's perceptions of you. So this is a very long cycle, right? This is a
yeah,
20-year cycle. Pluto going into his first, how old is your son?
he'll be 16 on July 11th.
Okay, so what's going to happen is he's going to be going through a constant metamorphosis over the next 20 years of like who he is, what his identity is, how he wants to show up in the world, how he wants other people to see him. And this can be like internal stuff, or it could also be something as simple as like him constantly changing his hair every year, or changing his body, or like changing his style, or suddenly like he dyes his hair blue, or whatever that looks like. People who have Pluto going through their first house, they are constantly doing the metamorphosis over and over and over again on how they show up in the world and how they
Mm,
look, right? So someone who has Pluto going through their first house right now, they're going to look one way now, they're going to look different a year from now, and 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now,
mm,
because they're supposed to continue to change. So
crazy.
it's not always going to like seem or look the same way over
Yeah.
these 20 years. And that sounds obvious. Yeah, of course, we all change over 20 years. Some people do not actually. But most of us change over 20 years, but for him it's really going to be all around his identity and
Yeah.
expressing his identity and like how he wants the world to see him in this way.
Very, very interesting.
But like if he cuts his hair one day, don't be surprised. And then the next day, if he gets like, I don't know, he suddenly starts wearing like weird clothes, not weird, but different clothes.
It's just,
It's like, it's part of the process.
it'll be a roller coaster of transformation.
Roller coaster.
Just ride it.
But for him, it's a big deal because it's all around. The first house is all about you and your entire self identity. So it's almost like it's forcing him to, it's the, not force, but yeah, it's essentially being a catalyst to like force him to become empowered in his own identity.
Right. I love that.
Because Pluto's all about power.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting.
I'm sure he'll go away to school if he chooses to go away to school, right? And then he'll come back and he'll look completely different then. And then he'll look different then. And like every few years, you're gonna be like, oh my God, I don't even recognize my son anymore.
So crazy.
I know.
Now, in your birth chart, though, so not in the sense of like, because I'm understanding now more like natal chart versus transit chart or where it's at, but in your birth chart, when you're looking at your birth chart and you're like, okay, where's Pluto in my birth chart, whatever sign it's in, whatever house it's in, does that mean like these are overall themes
that have been happening in this area of your life? Yeah, like this has been like where you've had to constantly like shift and transform and change. Pluto has been sitting there. But remember, Pluto sits in a sign for a very long time. It sits in signs for 15 years, 20 years, sometimes 25 years. It's the farthest away from the Earth. It takes 280 something years to do a full orbit or a full cycle. Go through all of the signs in the zodiac, which is why we don't feel Pluto's effect in every single aspect of our life, because we don't live to be 280 years old. So we're going to feel the effect of Pluto's shifting in a few different subjects or areas of our life. Where it's in your birth chart, that's essentially like the area that it's been continuously forcing or implementing change and transformation, like
interesting,
being a catalyst over and over and over again. That being said, because it stays in signs for so long, it's really a generational planet. So like people born in like the same generation all have Pluto in the same sign.
Oh yeah,
they would. Okay.
Because it stays in that sign for a long time. And then people in another generation all have Pluto in another sign, and the previous generation all have Pluto in another sign. So it's not uncommon for people in your same age group. In fact, it's expected that a lot of people in the same generation as you are all going to have Pluto in the same sign as you. But where it hits your chart is going to be different for every single person, dependent. This is why it's so important not just to understand the sign, but your whole chart. Because everyone, like my generation, I have Pluto in Scorpio. Everybody in my generation has Pluto in Scorpio, right?
Yeah.
But where it sits in your chart is different for every single person.
So and like the house.
The house, yeah. And if you have natal planets there, that also changes it. Or if it's like opposing another planet or squaring, like this is where things get, again, more
complicated.
Yes. Yeah, but more individualized in that sense.
Individualized and personalized. But essentially, Pluto is a generational planet. So if you're like, oh, I have Pluto here, it's not surprising that like a lot of people in the same age group, in fact, it's not that it's not surprising, it's expected that everyone in the same age group as you would have Pluto in the same sign.
But then you have these generations that kind of come forward and do certain things. And now it's like, that kind of even makes sense where you have like this generation that they're like, oh, this generation's more
change.
Yeah. So depending where that generation, that's
so all the children being born for the next 15 years past November 19th will have
20 years.
Sorry. Yeah. We'll have Pluto in Aquarius, which, they might be a little bit rebellious and make changes because they're just not going to put up with that shit.
Yeah, they're also part of like the catalyst of the future of where we're going.
Yes.
The children that are reincarnating now are not by accident. Like they're supposed to be being part of that catalyst. Like so many moms, like the kids that are being born now, like they're part of the spiritual awakening process for a lot of people.
Because I love that.
Supposed to be.
Yeah, goosebumps. Oh, it's so fun.
Also, we have eclipse season coming up in the fall. I forgot to mention that. Eclipse season coming up in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have Mars retrograde at the end of the year too. But we have a season. There's a lot happening this year. Essentially, as much as that's happening this year, there's even more happening next year. So I feel like this year is just 2023, what I've been saying, generally, 2023 was a build up to 2024, and 2024 is a build up to 2025. Because when we talk about just one outer planet, right, Pluto, and its impact, when it shifts signs, next year at some point, all of the outer planets will be in different signs.
Wow.
So when we talk about collectively the shift that we're like, these shifts that we're stepping into, this is all just building.
When does it slow down? Does it?
I don't know.
I haven't looked that far ahead yet.
I mean, it will at one point, but it's at this point, it's not. I mean, this summer things will slow down, right?
Yeah.
In for integration. But when people are like, am I ever going to get a break? I'm like, honestly, probably not. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean, of like, we are part of the generations that reincarnated in this time period to be huge catalysts for like change and all of these big things that are coming. So even if we get small breaks and retrogrades and like reprievals here and there, the energy of like momentum of like progression and innovation and where we're going towards is going to continue to move forward.
I love
So
that.
there is no slow. It's like the train has left the station and we're on it.
Yeah.
Will it make stops during the way?
Yeah.
It's left the station. Like there is no going back.
There's no going back.
Yeah.
And so it's appreciate the stops. That's what
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing. I'm like, okay, so when we have these little reprieves, let's actually appreciate it, take advantage of it, because then we're going to be, start to full blown go again. So
And it feels like the summer is just the calm before the storm.
Yeah.
It's so exciting.
I'm also excited because I like change.
Yeah, me too.
I like change except when it happens in my own life, but I like I'm like, I like change around everywhere. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's burn this down and rebuild it. Let's
yes.
Very Scorpio thing. I'm like, but then it shows up in my own life and I'm like, oh, I can't handle this.
It's so true. It's like until it inconveniences me, and then I'm like, actually, maybe not. No. Oh no, this is exciting. It's really exciting. I love it.
Can I ask what programs do you use to look at your charts and stuff like that as a professional astrologer? Like what?
So I actually have professional astrology software. It's called AstroGold. That I download on my computer, that I use. It's a bit pricey, so I don't, if you're not going to be doing astrology on a regular basis, you may not want to invest in it, especially because there's so many free resources online. I also would be careful on where you're looking at your birth chart online, because I've noticed the theme lately where I don't know if it's like the algorithm on certain sites or like the technology, but some clients, like they'll put in their chart information on one website and it'll say one rising sign, and they'll put the exact same information on another website and it'll say another rising sign.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about, but I use professional astrology software that's called AstroGold, but there are other softwares that you can also like buy and purchase and download. Regarding websites that are free, one that astrologers recommend a lot is astro.com. But I hesitate to recommend that one because it literally looks like you're looking at a different language, and there's not a lot of, there's like no explanation. So if you don't know how to actually read a birth chart, it's not helpful for someone who doesn't know how to. If someone knows how to read a birth chart, it's a great site to use, but it's not necessarily the best resource for someone who doesn't know how to read a birth chart. In fact, you might look up your chart on astro.com and look at it and be like, I don't understand any of this, and then feel so overwhelmed you don't want to look at it.
Right.
There's another site that I recommend that clients can look up. It's called astroseek.com. It's astro-seek, SEEK.com. And that's actually a really great site. It can also show you like your transits, your transit chart, as well as your birth chart. It can show you your progress chart and progressions and everything, which we don't even need to go into. It can show you a lot of things that are happening in your chart, and it does give you the most accurate information.
Awesome.
So that's the one that I would actually recommend for people who just want to look up their own chart online. Astro-seek.com. I also know that like CoStar is really popular for everybody. I'm even on CoStar. I don't like use it all the time because I have my own software, but I know that that's a popular app that a lot of people use as well. So listen, anything that helps you just get interested, like I'm not affiliated with any of these like brands or sites or anything like that. I just like, if you find one that works for you, then just use that one.
Yeah.
Right? Just double check to make sure that like the chart looks the same on a few different sites, because I'm noticing that it doesn't always.
Weird.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. No, I love that, because I know like when I was kind of been getting more into it, I'm like, oh, like which one would people suggest? Because if I'm going to spend money, I want to make sure it's, you know, a good one.
Just do Astro dash, not slash dash seek.com, SEEK.com. And I'll
Perfect.
message that to you guys so you can like put it in
We'll
your
put it in
show
the show notes. Yeah. And
notes.
where
Yeah,
can people,
and that's free, by the way.
Ooh,
awesome.
I love that.
Yeah. And so where can people find you on like,
Oh,
yeah.
great. So I am on Instagram and YouTube. I just recently started posting on YouTube. But I'm mostly primarily on Instagram at Asya Rose 13. So it's ASYAROSE number 13. And you can find me on my website, astrarose.com. And I do private readings. I'm also going to be launching like a monthly membership thing for people who can't either afford one-on-one sessions or who just want extra exclusive content, because there's only so much you can post on social media because like, you know, people's attention spans are so short. And
Yeah.
well, I mean, like if I post a video that's really long on Instagram, some people will really enjoy it and other people won't. So I'm really trying to build like a community and a membership that's really just about like creating specific content that people want to see. For example, like I'm going to be posting a lot more stuff about like mothers and children and how to like unpack your child's chart and things like that. Not everyone on Instagram wants to see that, but like that's something that I'll be offering in like a community aspect. Just like more specific things that like I'm getting feedback from people that are following me or that are clients or that are just like messaging me and letting me know, hey, I want to see more of this. I can't always post everything on social media, so I want to create like a safe space and platform for everyone to like get that content as well. And that you can sign up for on my website. I haven't launched it yet, but there's a wait list right now, and that will be coming very soon as well.
Oh, that's so fun.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love
Okay.
that.
So you do individual readings. You're going to have this membership launching soon, and people can follow and learn from you mostly on Instagram, just starting out on YouTube, and we'll link everything in our show notes. Yeah. It was such a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. We will have you back definitely another time.
Can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
All right.